Is Mr. Ackerman presenting, or is it Frank? Are you presenting?
I'm going to let Phil. Frank, would you just offer up what we?
Yeah, let me share my screen.
Let me swear you in, Frank.
Oh, sorry.
Please raise your right hand and state your name and address for the record.
Frank Greenwald, 295 Main Street, Sag Harbor, New York.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Let me just bring my screen up here. Okay, so the last meeting we were in front of you, we talked about the renovation of this existing accessory residence on this property on 50 Highway behind the pond. The only sort of objection that came up was, or at least that I heard, was the height of the building. And I guess first I just want to apologize for taking so long to get this, but our client's been out of touch, and so it took a while to get them to give us their approval. But so anyway, the only objection that I heard, or that we heard, was about the height of this building. So what we've proposed is to drop the height of the building down to the highest point of 19 foot 11, which is, just a hair below what the maximum garage height is allowable in the village of East Hampton. And that's sort of what we've done. Just to reiterate, it's the same number of bedrooms. We're adding some bathrooms in it, and we're adding a roof structure, proposing to add a roof structure to make it look more in keeping with whatever else happens in the village, as opposed to this, which is, sort of not a pleasant looking structure. And that's really all. That's so the only change that we're proposing is to drop the height of the roof in this one gable section down to 19 foot 11 from, I think it was 22 foot something.
22.7, yeah.
All right. Any objections from the board?
I'd just like to comment that I think it's an improvement, and both in terms of the substance of this particular application and in terms of the precedent, and thank the applicant for the modification.
Okay, great.
I'd like to echo that as well.
As would I. Thank you.
Okay, can we have a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
please.
I second.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Mr. Ackerman.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Yep. So we have the continued hearing for Michael Kretschmar and Chuck Thomas, 35 McGurk Street. Pam, can you just indicate who is sitting on this application?
Sure. We have Mr. McGurk, Mr. O'Connell, Mr. Rose, Ms. Doyle, Mr. Barris.
Okay. And we understand that Mr. Tarvert's out of town, but he's going to try to be on this call with us. So
Yes, he's there.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
we are.
Oh, great. Okay. So yeah, I apologize. I'm on my phone. I'm out of town. So this application was on in November, and there are a number of variances. The board seemed to have no issue with any of the variances, other than what was there seemed to be some concern with was the artist studio that the applicant would like to convert to a pool house. And in doing so, they had offered to move it further from the property line and make it smaller. They had also offered to remove the insulation. I do think the board still had some concerns with it. So we're coming back to the board with two additional offers. One is to record a covenant that would allow the building inspector to come and inspect it to make sure no one's using it for anything other than a pool house. And the second was accessory structure is allowed to be 14 feet high, but we're offering to voluntarily keep it at 12 feet high, which is actually this artist studio was originally approved in 1995 at 12 feet high. So essentially, what we're asking to do is to keep to convert the artist studio to a pool house, but in doing so, we're actually just making it smaller and moving it further from the property line, and then adding those additional conditions to hopefully get your approval.
Okay. Any board members have any issues with this at this point or want to talk? Okay. Anybody on the phone? Any call-ins?
There's currently nobody on the line.
Okay, thank you. So can we have a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
I have a second. All right, thank you. Thank you, John.
right. Thank you.
So we have the continued hearing now of Michael and Christine Aaron at RIA 17 Toilsome Lane. We were leaving the hearing open for written comment, which we have received. We've received a lot of information in the last 2 days. So at this point, Vinny, we're going to have to read this information. Can we close the hearing and then still discuss the material that we've received, only the material that we received at the next meeting if we need to?
You can close the hearing and then you can discuss whatever you wish at the next meeting prior to or in the process of making a decision.
Mr. Chair, before we move to close the hearing, I have a question for council.
Yes.
Okay, and so this is just to make sure I understand the procedural aspects here. This is technically an appeal of a determination by the building inspector regarding the appropriateness of the zoning interpretation. Is that correct?
An interpretation, right? Not a determination.
Not an interpretation.
So
But
first we have to figure out, the board has to figure out whether or not there was an actual interpretation
Right. So
made here.
So as far as I can tell, and I sadly have decades of experience in use group analysis from the city of New York, the only thing that I saw that constituted something that could be asserted to be an interpretation was a reference in the minutes of the design review board. But
that's what the applicant is claiming is the interpretation.
So as far as I can tell, and this is, I want to make sure this is on the record before we close the hearing. It seems to me that there has not yet been either the issuing of a building permit pursuant, a formal action taken pursuant to that interpretation, or an explicit formal determination by the building inspector. So this may be premature to my perspective in terms of the consideration. So without prejudice to the substance being
There
submitted.
are procedural issues that must be addressed before we get to the substance.
Right. So if we close, I just don't want to find us moving forward with prejudice one way or the other when there's a procedural issue.
Right. So, but that's part of what's before you. So that, the board may in fact decide that the procedural issues are such that it would preclude going any further. And if that's the case, the board would issue a decision that says that.
So
If the board
going
thinks-
further, I just want to be, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to be clear. If we make that determination at this point, that doesn't preclude a resubmission down the road if there's an issue. So I just want to be clear on that matter for the.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Mr. Rose.
Thank you.
We do have additional material we have to read. We just received it in the last day or so. So can I have a motion? Go
I
ahead.
make a motion to close the hearing.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you all for your comments. So we're going to move on to the hearing part today, and we're going to let Pam rest her voice, and Billy's going to read the notices, I believe. Thank you.
Application of Orion Properties LLC, Suffolk County Tax Map Number 301-9610.3 for area variances from Chapter 278 zoning to legalize AC condenser units and a barbecue. Variances of 16.3 feet and 12.5 feet are requested from Section 278 3A 5B to legalize 4 AC condenser units and a barbecue grill located 3.7 feet and 7.5 feet respectively from the side yard lot line where the required setbacks are 20 feet and any other relief necessary. The subject property is 100,585 square feet in area and is located at 40 Further Lane in Residence District R160. This project is classified as a type 2 action in accordance with SECRA.
Thank you, Billy. Is the applicant?
Lori Wiltshire is here for the applicant.
Good morning,
Lori,
Lori.
let me swear you in.
Sure.
Please raise your right hand and state your name and address for the record.
Lori Wiltshire, 231 Pantigo Road, East Hampton, New York, 11937.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
So the applications is for 2 side yard variances to legalize the placement of 4 AC condenser units and a masonry barbecue. These variances are largely required due to the location of the pre-existing non-conforming residence on this oddly shaped lot. This property benefited from similar variances granted last year for dormers and other renovation work to the existing residence. It was during the course of that construction that the AC units and grilling station were installed. Granting these variances will not cause any change in the character of the neighborhood or produce a detriment to nearby properties. This is a flag lot, which is well landscaped with shrubs and mature trees. The neighboring properties cannot see the items we are seeking to legalize. While the variances are substantial, this is due strictly to the location of the house and should not preclude granting the variances. The AC units and barbecue will have little or no impact on nearby properties. In fact, the property to the east, 46 Further Lane, is owned by the same owner and in a different LLC. And there is an accessory structure on that adjacent parcel that blocks the AC units and barbecue from being seen from Further Lane. There will be no adverse impacts to the environmental or physical conditions. None of the surrounding parcels will be affected. It's well screened, environmentally benign, similar to what was granted for Shaw on Dayton Lane, 70 Dayton Lane. And they were AC units on either side of the house that did not meet side yard or front yard setbacks, but were in fact well screened. The hardship is self-created, but given the location of the existing residence and other improvements on the lot, there was really no alternative location for the items without the requested setback relief.
Okay, thank you, Lori. Yes, an oddly shaped lot, definitely. So does any board members have any comment on this?
I have a couple of comments.
Go ahead.
So one is, it is an oddly shaped, but if it weren't for the bizarre shape of the lot, this, I have a very different attitude, and until one goes and takes a look at it, it's a different kind of an application. Why is the lot shaped that way? I mean, since it's owned by the same entity, can you explain, why or different entities, same owner, why is it shaped like that, and why does it not make sense to try to correct that at some point?
Well, the structures on the adjacent lot kind of preclude that. They don't meet setbacks either, but there's this 1-story frame garage, which is literally right next to the AC units and the barbecue. So, and then the house on the other lot it is an oddly shaped lot, but it is a flag lot. So I don't see how you can really reshape it.
It's a strange condition, and I'm not sure why it was created. Firstly, the second thing goes to the point of, so when these units were installed, I have no problem with the location given the unique conditions here, but I do have a concern about people putting things in and then coming after the fact to get permission for them. Mm-hmm. It would have been, this is a condition that was the applicant or whoever was building this was aware of in advance of the installation of the equipment, and going forward,
I'm not sure all people know that AC units and barbecues have to meet setbacks.
So we need to the applicant and to the board and to the village going forward, we need people to understand that don't put things in and then come and ask permission afterwards. Seek permission in advance.
And they know they need variances. They were before us already. I think it was within probably the past 18 months for the variance in the roof. Nobody would think that they need those, but they were advised. There's an alternate spot for the AC units on the other side of the house where they would meet setbacks. It seems like they just did it in the face of knowing the requirements, and the setback request is substantial. On a percentage basis, and it is self-created. So I find it a bit of a challenge, but those are my comments.
Thank you,
So I think because of the location of the dining terrace, I think the barbecue was put over there for convenience of serving food.
Okay. Jimmy, have any comments?
I know that that there is these AC units, I don't think they're actually depicted on the survey per our conversation, John, correctly. They're more up against the house. They are screened. I don't think they really affect anyone. Do we know how long they've been there?
They were put in when the construction was being done for the dormers, the project that was previously approved on this property.
How is that, years or?
And also, I should point out that the AC units where they used to be didn't meet setbacks either. They were just relocated to the side of the house. That decision, yeah, sure. I have it here. Let me find the date. The hearing was held in April of 2021.
Yeah, it was recently here.
The decision was May of 2021. So was that after that?
Seeing that they're screened, and I don't think there has been any complaints about these before. I don't have a problem with them.
Okay, thank you. Carrie, any comments?
I don't have a problem. They're next to a long driveway, shared driveway, so doesn't seem to be used very often. So I think it's okay.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to, Mr. Chairman, just want to underscore what I said before. Again, this was there's a unique condition here in terms of the configuration of the lot, but for precedential purposes, just the fact that something exists is not going to be a grounds for approval going forward when people move forward without appropriate permission.
Yes.
Thank you. So we have a motion to close the hearing?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Okay, thank you. So we're on to the next hearing, please. House on the Pond LLC, 10 Lockwood Lane.
Application of House on the Pond, Inc., Suffolk County Tax Map Number 301-13-10-15 for variances from Chapter 278 zoning and a wetlands permit in accordance with Chapter 163 freshwater wetlands to raise the existing improvements within wetland setbacks, install fill and grade the property, install a vegetated buffer adjacent to wetlands, and construct a new single-family residence and accessory structures. A 16-foot variance is required from Section 278-3A to construct a residence 34 feet from the front yard lot line, where the required setback is 50 feet. A 333.5 square foot variance is required from Section 278-3A13A to construct a residence containing 5,715.5 square feet of gross floor area, where the maximum permitted gross floor area is 5,382 square feet. A 4.4 foot variance is requested from Section 278-3B2A to construct a residence with a height of 38.4 feet, where the maximum height for a residence is 34 feet. I'm sorry, 38.4 feet, where the maximum height is 34 feet. And a 5-foot variance is required from Section 278-3A5C to construct swimming pool equipment approximately 35 feet from the side yard lot line, where the required setback is 40 feet and any other relief necessary. The subject property is 43,816 square feet in area and is located at 10 Lockwood Lane in Residence District R160. The property fronts on Hook Pond and is located in FEMA flood zone AE. Minimum elevation is 11. This project is classified as a type 2 action in accordance with SECRA.
Okay, thank you, Billy. Pam, who's going to sit on this application?
Is anybody recusing?
No.
No.
Okay.
So Dave Harvey, D&D Harvey Architects, presenting for the owners.
Okay, go ahead, Dave.
Let me swear you in, please. Raise your right hand and state your name and address for the record.
David Harvey, 21 Cove Road, Sag Harbor, New York.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're presenting a house for Rena and Paul Stallings, who own this property and the adjacent property on Lockwood Lane. So what they're intending to do is to build their new home while selling their existing home on the front lot. So this lot has wetlands, freshwater wetlands restriction, which is pushing the house closer to Lockwood Lane, which is requiring the front yard setback. The height requirement on this lot is a little restrictive because we have to conform to FEMA. So if we have to lift the house for FEMA, that is why we need the 4-foot variance on height.
I agree.
The height variance is really just to a peak in the center of the building. The perimeter of the building is all within the 34-foot height restriction. As for the pool equipment, it's actually inside the attached garage. So technically it is too close to the property line, but it's within the building, within the main structure. The size of the house, since there's no room on the property for a garage, we've attached the garage, which then makes it GFA. So essentially, we could have had this much building on the property if we could have had a detached garage, but since we've attached it, and with the FEMA restrictions used over the garage for HVAC space, I think the house is as condensed as it can be. It's a large family. They have 6 children, all of which use this house. So basically that's the reason for the variances. And if you guys have any questions, I can expand.
Thanks, Dave. Any board members have any questions at this point?
I have a quick question regarding the height. I know we're raising this 4 feet, but if it's 38'5", doesn't that put that 5 more inches over the height limit?
So we submitted a couple drawings. I don't know if Dawn can pull one up. So the building department asked us to establish the average grade. So average grade through the middle of the site is like elevation 7, even though the predominant part of this house sits on an existing higher grade. So if we measure from the 7, if we say, okay, let's draw a line, the highest peak, which is on a tower, ends up being that 38.5. So it's literally the peak of a very small percentage of the house on a tower. The main ridge of the house is at the is below the 38 feet. So it's kind of depending on where you measure from the site. We thought we had it all well within the.
We're saying it's 3311.
So we're actually at like 3311 for a great majority of the house.
Okay.
I have a couple comments. You said that they're building, they live at 4 Lockwood, and they're building.
No,
this
nine
house.
Lockwood.
Oh, 9 Lockwood. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Understood. So the board has long held that anything that, when you're building brand new from scratch and you're clearing the lot, that you need to comply with the zoning requirements. I understand, pulling the house away from the pond is a good thing. I do have, I think some of the variances are substantial. There are alternatives, especially with the height. The increased GFA. I don't have an issue with the front yard setback, nor do I have an issue with locating the pool equipment in a garage, as long as it's either on a pad or it's kind of soundproofed, as we've spoken about in the past, that there's no windows facing the neighbor. So those are my comments.
Thanks, Phil. I have the same concerns that Philip has also. So Billy Kajak has written a memo on this. Do we want to hear from Billy first, or do we want to hear from other board members?
Can I just, before Billy,
okay, Bill.
his point, because I thought the memo was
Yep.
instructive, but just I want to agree with what the chair and Phil have said in terms of some of the items before us. The other thing is and I know Billy's going to I assume Billy's going to speak to this as well, but the sensitivity of our ponds in the village is a substantial issue, and the restrictions that come in terms of the setback areas and the conditions regarding fertilization and plantings and the like is a very real issue. We are losing our ponds in terms of their natural capacity, and I want to, in addition to the substantive issues in terms of that Billy's going to speak to in his memo, just can you also speak, Billy, to how we enforce and monitor the compliance with the conditions that are being made? Also, I know we got some submission that the trustees haven't had a chance to look at these matters, so I would just make sure that we hold the hearing open to allow for their input as well.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. Any other comments from the board members, or we go to Billy?
I'd like to make a comment maybe after Billy gives his presentation.
All right, thanks, Jimmy. Go ahead, Billy.
Good morning, board members. I provided the board with a memorandum dated February 3rd. I'm not going to regurgitate everything that I laid out in there. My general comments on the projects are, though, that it is an environmentally sensitive area. It's rather low lying in nature. A good proportion of the property is within the wetland jurisdiction from Hook Pond, and the property is fairly visible to the general public. It's not even though it's on a private road, it's adjacent to property that was purchased with the intent of preserving open space. So the house was demolished and the property is going to be restored. And that restoration includes removal of the evergreen hedge that exists along Ocean Avenue right now. And it is visible from, public areas, mainly the main beach parking lot. Generally speaking, though, from an environmental perspective, they have a non-conforming house and a non-conforming septic system. Relocating those structures to more conforming locations and to conform with the wetland setbacks is a positive. That's a very good aspect of the project. They are putting in a new innovative alternative septic system, and I would add that they're including a shallow pressurized drain field, which is the best treatment that we can achieve from an on-site sanitary system. So those are all benefits. It's up to the board to weigh the options that they have in terms of granting relief from the height requirements. That's a decision for the board to make. But from an environmental perspective, I would support the project. They are proposing right now the property is, I would say, largely cleared. It's entirely lawn, and the project proposes a 10-foot buffer. That's good. The village code is 125 feet. So if it could be improved upon, obviously that would be something that achieves a better result for the project. And in terms of monitoring, to answer Mr. Rose's question, the village does that simply by, issuing a C of O when the property is issued a C of O. The survey will show what the limits of clearing are and what areas have been revegetated. And it's basically eyes and boots on the ground to establish that they maintain that. And I guess in the sky we have aerials. And when we notice things that are changing on the property, that's an opportunity for the village to, determine whether or not the conditions of the permit are being upheld. The board could also impose a covenant to put future owners on notice that the buffer area is to not be disturbed or has to be maintained. That's an option, and it doesn't assure that the area will not be disturbed, but it puts future owners on notice so that they can, they're aware of that. So that's an option as well for the board.
Thank you, Billy. So I think you've heard the comments from the board. I think we're concerned about the height. We're concerned about the size. We're going to have the town trustees might weigh in on this a little bit. They want to wait for them to get us some information on it. So we'll keep the hearing open till the next meeting, Pam?
March 11th.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, can I just one follow-up question for Billy, because it has to do with the the use of fertilizers in the setback, in the 125-foot buffer, right? That you spoke to that in your memo, and so there's the revegetation buffer area along the pond itself. Then there are the lawn treatment protocols in the 125-foot area. And we've seen, this is without regard to this particular the broader topic. I'm sorry, I don't mean to imply that this applicant would or would not abide by that. What do we do in terms of ongoing monitoring, whether it's on Georgia Pond or Hook Pond, or to see to it that there is compliance with the conditions as laid out? Is there anything that's done?
Well, the village requires the issuance of a certificate of occupancy upon any transfer of property. And so that yields an inspection by the building department. And the survey that's referenced on the C of O has to show limits of clearing. So if a property has an area that is required to be maintained as a buffer, that's one mechanism that the village has to try to capture potential violations. The second is, eyes on the ground and residents noticing things. We get calls quite frequently of people who are, think that something's happening or see something happening, and we investigate. And thirdly, we, regularly review aerial photographs.
But let me be clear what I'm asking, because I'm not asking about the buffer, which I understand but there are also protocols in terms of fertilizer use within a certain area of the pond, right?
Yes. Well, if you have pre-existing lawn, you have a pre-existing non-conforming condition, you can maintain it. Unless the village imposes a restriction based on a determination by the board, that's the only avenue that you have to control whether fertilizer usage is.
In my reading, and I'm sorry to belabor, I don't want to bore everybody with this, but for this application, for another one that I think we're hearing next, and for other ones we have heard in the past, there have been these provisions regarding the use of fertilizer, prohibitions on the use of fertilizer within the 125-foot area.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, other than the C of O monitoring that you're talking about, is there any ongoing monitoring effort on the part of the village to assure that that's being complied with in those situations where those restrictions are in place?
Other than covenants, no. We would have to impose a covenant on the property. Other than that, we'd have to inspect every landscaper that visits the site and look in their truck and decide whether it's lime or fertilizer that they're putting on the ground, which would be pretty hard to do.
So it'll be interesting. I look forward to hearing from the trustees on these matters in terms of their submission. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. Thank you, Dawn and Dave. So we'll keep this open until March 11th.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the last application, Mr. McMullen, chair it. I'm going to recuse myself. And thank you all. Okay, Pam or Billy, can you please read the?
Billy.
I gotta be quiet.
You're muted, Billy.
Sorry about that. Thank you. The third application, it's the application of Coup LLC, Suffolk County Tax Map number 301-13-10-3 for area variances from Chapter 278 zoning and a freshwater wetlands permit in accordance with Chapter 163 of the Village Code to legalize accessory improvements, clearing of native vegetation, installation of plantings, and the removal of Phragmites. Variances of 5.9 feet and 13 feet are required from sections 278-3A 5B and 278-3A8 to legalize a generator, 14.1 feet from the side yard lot line and 137 feet from wetlands where the required side yard setback is 20 feet and the required wetland setback is 150 feet. A 22-foot variance is required from section 278-3A8 to legalize the installation of 3 AC condenser units located 128 feet from wetlands where the required setback is 150 feet. A variance is required from section 278-3A8 and a wetlands permit in accordance with section 163-3 to legalize the clearing of native vegetation and the establishment of lawn within 125 feet of wetlands and to revegetate portions of this area with native plantings where clearing and landscaping within 125 feet of wetlands is prohibited. A wetlands permit is required in accordance with the provisions of section 163-6 to remove Phragmites from wetlands and adjacent areas by cutting with handheld equipment and any other relief necessary. The subject property is 67,763 square feet, is in the R160 zoning district, and is located at 17 Turbell Lane. The property is adjacent to Hook Pond, and this project requires approval of the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation and the East Hampton Town trustees. The project is classified as an unlisted action in accordance with SEQA.
Thank you, Billy.
Mr. Vice Chair,
Yes.
which alternate is going to sit on this application?
I'm
Andy
sitting
or
on this.
Shahab?
It's Shahab Karmeli. Andy reached out to me. I stepped in for him. So Shahab Karmeli.
You're going to sit
Thank
on
you,
this?
Shahab.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Shahab. The applicant, Bruce Horwith, are you on?
Excuse me, I am.
Okay. Would you like to walk us through this and give the board kind of an overview of the project?
Let me swear you
would
in,
be
Bruce.
possible.
Please raise your right hand and state your name and address for the record.
My name is Bruce Horwith. I live at 16 Salt Marsh Path, East Hampton, New York.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
I'm going to try to share a screen here.
Okay.
It doesn't seem to be doing it. Let's see.
There we go.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
So I have just a couple aerials to show the property. On the top right, it shows the location of the property, 17 Turbo Lane, relative to the rest of Hook Pond. And then there's an aerial of the property on the lower left. And what I will be doing is talking about the project. The application deals with some legalization of existing structure, but then also deals with revegetation and Phragmites control that Billy mentioned, and I'll be talking about the latter, about the vegetation portion of it. And within the section that I'm going to be talking about, I divided up into the wetlands restoration and revegetation. The wetlands restoration referring to the Phragmites control, and the revegetation referring to the revegetation of the area that's now an existing lawn. So in terms of the Phragmites control, the objective is to restore a little under 10,000 square feet of wetland by reducing the abundance of Phragmites and increasing the abundance of native vegetation. And I have some information about what Phragmites does, which in terms of degrading system, I won't go over that unless there's any questions about that at the end. The Phragmites in this location is mostly low to moderately dense, and there's quite a bit of native vegetation there, particularly sensitive fern, which you see in the pictures I'll show in a minute. And in terms of methodology for controlling the Phragmites, we're talking about sort of the least invasive way of doing it, which is just to cut them repeatedly over a 5-year period using handheld weed trimmers. And then, there's some information, there's some better practices in terms of better than other practices in terms of being most effective in terms of cutting. And I think I've gone over that with the board in the past, but just to summarize it basically requires multiple cuttings, and it requires that over several years. The only other thing I wanted to add at this point is that at the end of the last treatment year, I'm using the condition that DEC has required of some other past Phragmites control permits that I have with them, which is that there'd be a minimum of 95% of the treatment area would be covered with native species, either naturally regrown, which I would expect in this case, or seeded and planted. And if we do need to bring in additional species, candidate native species would include sensitive fern, tussock sedge, sawfresh, rose mallow. There could, I guess, potentially be some others too, but these would be the most likely ones to find in this area. I have a couple photos. This is an area facing north from the end of the lawn, showing the entrance of to the dock or to the walkway. There's really no dock at this point, and then it shows the Phragmites in the wetland.
Can you scroll down so we can See, those were still on the first photograph you showed us.
I'm sorry, say that again?
We're still on the first photograph you showed us. Can you scroll down or?
Oh.
Start your slideshow. Start your slideshow.
I did actually do that, but I think maybe I didn't advance them properly. Let's see. Can you see it now?
No,
Not that, but you see it on a different screen?
no.
No.
Huh.
Click on slide 4.
On slide 4?
Yeah.
I'm now showing slide 4, but you're not, you're saying?
Why don't you try closing this slide out, because this is in here on our screens. Maybe if you close this down and relaunch, it'll refresh. There you go.
There you go.
You have it now. You have it.
You are seeing it now?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I'm not actually in slide presentation, but that's all right, as long as you can see it. So
Yep.
there's a picture showing it from the entrance to the Phragmites area. You can see this as well, I guess. It's sharing properly now.
Yes.
Yes.
So this is a shot showing down the pathway. In addition to seeing the Phragmites, you can see the green plants along the side are mostly a sensitive fern. The better shot there showing the sensitive fern. And you can see there's some other things in there as well. There's groundsel in the background. There's some irises. And so the plan, as I said before I move on to the next slide, the plan in terms of this area is simply to cut the Phragmites repeatedly and allow the native vegetation that's underneath it to be released from the competition and hopefully replace the Phragmites. And a picture at the end, I think I also may have one that shows the area that is being cut. It's not the whole wetland, but it's the area to the left and right of that dock. In terms of the revegetation of the lawn, I'm going to just jump ahead for a second and show you a picture that will be useful in terms of, then I'll go back to the slide in terms of describing what we're trying to do. But in this slide, you can see the pink area is the area that had formerly been vegetated. It was considered wetland vegetation. It's within a wetland jurisdiction. A lot of it probably wasn't technical, it wasn't wetland vegetation per se, but that said, it was definitely not lawn and it was within the wetland area. And that we are proposing to not replace all that was there in terms of the exact shape that it was there previously, but instead to extend it off to, I guess that would be to the east. And basically we're increasing the amount of restored vegetation and lawn that will be removed. We're doing a slightly different configuration. And we've gone over that with Billy before, and I think it's something that he has supported. In terms of what we're doing, in terms of spelling it out, what we're talking about is removing 44,511 square feet of existing lawn. And we are removing that and replacing it in native species. In terms of what had formerly existed there in terms of native vegetation was 4,367, as best we can calculate that. In terms of the planting, it will include approximately 5,000 plugs of native grasses, and there will also be 140 native shrubs and forbs. We have that spread out. I don't know if it would be literally, we want to try to keep a natural look. I don't know if it'd be completely spread out in terms of the 12-inch centers and what was it for the shrubs? I guess it was, well, even there it's 12-inch centers. I don't know if it would be that homogeneous or heterogeneously spread out, but the idea would be to cover the whole area and not stack all the shrubs in one area versus another. That's all I had in terms of this section. I don't know, maybe before we move on, I think Joan McGurban will be here to address the other part of the application, but before we move on to that, maybe I should try to answer any questions there may be.
I think it's very whoever I inadvertently interrupted as you were going. I'm sorry, but I think it's I am not always opposed to xenospecies and genus, but in this case, and spending a lot of time around those ponds, I think it's a great idea, and I think it should be taken up at some point as a general call to restore native species here. I think your presentation is very detailed, and I think you are in balance creating a more long-term sustainable, and from my personal taste, a more visually appealing landscape once you're complete with this. And I go through this in different places. I think your presentation is very detailed, especially given the subject matter here, and I personally want to compliment you on it.
Thank you.
I would agree with Shab. Thank you, Shab.
I have a question. Bruce, why are you moving the revegetation? I guess it's a little bit more to the southwest, it looked like, as opposed to revegetating what was taken over as lawn?
Right. The reason we're doing that is because I guess it's a combination. It's mostly, I would say, an aesthetic issue. It also has to do with the fact that if it was to stick with the original landscape that had been there, it comes up quite a bit closer to the house and into the lawn area. We thought that it made more sense, both aesthetically and also in terms of benefits to the pond, to have a buffer that's more extensive along the pond shore as compared to necessarily coming upland towards the house. But there really wasn't any specific rhyme or reason to that particular design. It just wanted to spread it out along the shore more. I guess one other thing that I would mention is that the issue of monitoring on the use of fertilizer and I should add irrigation, which is equally important, was brought up by one of the board members. And as Billy pointed out, it is extremely difficult to actually monitor what the landscapers are doing. One of the advantages of having a landscape, a buffer of native vegetation, is that it doesn't require fertilization. And so, it makes it that much more likely, especially compared to a lawn. It makes it that much more likely that there won't be any fertilizer brought into the area close to the water. And then any irrigation that is used there will be temporary. And once the plant's established, which would probably be after a year or two, then the irrigation can be removed.
Right. So I may add to that, because I think all of these applications are touching on a broader subject of chemical usage of lawns, which I oppose, and it's not up to individual homeowners to resolve that. You can have 90% compliance and 10% non-compliance, and it doesn't solve the problem. But the reality is that the beauty of native species is that they don't require maintenance. They're not hothouse orchids. And the fact is that over time, they cross-pollinate, this texture changes, and you go from a change of 120 to a ratio of 180 to a different mix. That's the beauty of these natural landscapes. And I think what you've done with expanding that and moving that further along is great. I love the scheme. I think it could serve as a model for a lot of your neighbors to engage in the same kind of remediation, even if they're not in front of a ZBA and needing to do it for some other reason.
I agree. Thank you. Joan, would you allow Pam to swear you in?
She's an attorney, right? You're an attorney?
I'm an attorney.
So she doesn't need to be. Yes.
I'm well, some might say that otherwise.
No, Avenatti wasn't sworn in.
I'm here to answer the board's questions with respect to legalizing the generator, the AC condenser units, and the vegetable garden. We believe the amount of mitigation that we're proffering should at least exonerate us for our sins of not legalizing these structures and putting them in without a building permit. There should be no effect to the neighborhood. There's no other method really on the property to have these things exist. And there should be no adverse effect to the environment. And with that, if Billy Hayjack would like to speak, I'm happy to answer any questions the board may have at the end.
That would be great. Billy?
Hi, board members. So again, I prepared a report to the board dated February 8th. I won't regurgitate everything that's outlined in the report. I would just like to reiterate that, Phragmites removal is a positive as long as it's done correctly. We monitor the progress of these projects through on-site visits and the reliance on the applicant to provide annual reports explaining what they've done and how they've done it. Generally speaking, these Phragmite removal projects are being done in areas where it's a monoculture of Phragmites, meaning they can go in and cut and mow and not, there's very little ability to harm other native plantings. And, even in situations like that, we've had some non-compliant issues where they take it a little too far and start regrading the property and whatnot. So, oversight is critical. And in this case, I have outlined a number of recommended conditions of the approval. And I think if the applicant is willing to accept those conditions and abide by them, I think the project could be successful. I would, my overarching recommendation here is that this project was identified because the Phragmites were cut without approval, and the village became aware of it, and that's what triggered this application, and that's how we figured out that what was a native buffer had been taken over by lawn, and so we're recovering that lawn. I think that's technically it's a violation, and I think that needs to be corrected before they pursue Phragmites cuttings. So that's one of my the primary recommendations here, and then following that are the number of conditions that I'd outlined in the report to make sure that there's somebody on site who knows the difference between Phragmites and sensitive fern. You'd be surprised how many landscapers don't. So I think those types of little details are critical to the success of the project, and I would hope that those conditions are imposed as a condition of the approval. The one other item I know the town trustees have asked to opine on this. It is a project that's going to require town trustee approval, and I think it'd be prudent to give them the opportunity to comment to the board as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. And as Billy said, they did reach out to the board and ask for an extension to kind of review this stuff as well as look at the property a little further. So I would like to keep this application open until the next hearing. But before we get to that point, are there any comments from the board members?
Yeah, I have a comment. I have grave concerns because of the environmental sensitivity of this area and the applicant's desire to do it correctly, just based on what has happened prior, where they've expanded the lawn into the wetlands and they have cut the Phragmites with any sort of without the benefit of a permit. I have serious concerns about this project.
Yeah, I know looking at, and I know the board members have looked at this, the recommended conditions that Billy has presented to us get pretty extensive. And I think that is good for not only everyone to know that this is what the board is looking for, but it also protects our waterways and the wildlife and everything. So I think that's important. And I think we will get more information from the trustees once they have a moment to review this stuff. So
may I add also that, in the interest of a board, which I believe has a duty to protect the environment, protect way of life out here, one of the reasons I moved out here, but also has an interest to help people get certain things done. And I like imposing conditions, especially given the chance that there was a past error here, let's call it. But also, if the list of impositions becomes such that in effect it's a no without saying a no, or it's a list of asks that are in the real world don't have the time, the capacity, or resources to monitor, and it becomes endless regulation. Just fundamentally, I'm opposed to that also. There has to be a balance between, living in a land of unicorns where everybody abides by everything as they should and the reality of the world. And I would ask that whatever impositions are being made, they're being taken with some pragmatism and reality in place. These are changing landscapes. This is not it's not taking a monument in downtown New York City, say you use this stone in this size and you're done. no matter what we do, these are living landscapes. I know from my own gardens and my projects around the country, they change. And if we are going to approve this, and from what I've heard so far, I would say that I like what this gentleman's engaging in doing. And okay, so they made a mistake before and they're not rectifying it and addressing it. I would not support a position of long list of conditions, and I haven't seen those yet, so I'm just speaking in vacuum, that in effect would make it implausible to either implement or to monitor. And I think it's a giant waste of everybody's time when it starts going down that path. If you just want to say no to it, you say no.
May I comment before we close from this?
Yes.
I just want to respond that in general, I've already seen the conditions that Billy had developed, and we discussed them, and I think they're very reasonable, and actually I can see them being useful on projects like this, throughout the village and throughout the town. In terms of the specific thing having to do with one of the requirements, and again, I don't want to make too big an issue out of this, Billy, if you really don't have any flexibility on this. It seems to me that having that 48-hour notice for every single one of the cuttings, when you're talking about trying to deal with landscapers, and I'm very careful about who I use for landscaping jobs, so I don't have a large group of people to work with. I work within their schedules. I would think that having a 48-hour notice in the beginning of the season for the first cut and at the end of the season would be adequate. And then whether or not we can get a third and fourth cut in every season, we don't always know. I'd like to see that condition removed if there's flexibility there. If not, we'll live with that. And the only other comment that I would make is that regardless of, I think it's obviously great that you're including the trustees before you make a decision, but regardless of whether or not that inclusion had taken place, we need to go to the trustees for permits as well as the state. So, that's always an integral part of what we're talking about.
Yeah, and this is good that we have this overlap between our board as well as the trustees. And I think this is a great starting point that you have already started talking with Billy and come up with a plan, and I commend you on that. Is there anyone on the line that would like to comment on this?
Mr. Chair, Vice Chair,
no callers.
I just want to speak to some of the issues that have been raised. First of all, I want to affirm what Phil said. I share the concerns. A couple of issues, having gone and looked at the property, I think it's terrific to be restoring. I have no problem cutting the Phragmites. I think it's crucially important that it be done in an appropriate and carefully monitored way, especially given the history of this property. I don't think that exoneration is the word that I would use regarding the generator and the like. It's really a question of mitigation at this point of something that is not appropriately located. And I guess the question is, how is that going to be proposed to be mitigated? Because that's a big piece of equipment right abutting a property that's a sensitive natural property. So I understand moving it at this point might be problematic, but whatever we do, figuring out how to mitigate that is something that's going to be important. And also going to the memo that Billy prepared, I noticed that in 1997, I believe it is, there was in connection with previous permissions granted to this property, there were a whole series of conditions that were imposed, including prohibition on the use of fertilizers within 125 feet of the pond, which I'm not a horticulturist or a lawn guy, but what?
I think they've gone to the wayside. Yes,
right. I think that's fallen off. So I think we need to have a serious discussion and a discussion with the trust without singling out this application. We need to take this stuff seriously and make sure, in conjunction with the trustees and conjunction with the village officials, that when we put a condition attached to an application for something that we think is appropriate, we need to make sure that those conditions are abided by. And casually waiting for the property to be transferred, with the C of O, down the road isn't going to do it. And we have these problems now.
Yes, I agree.
But sorry, Joe, isn't that I agree with everything you said, by the way, because this is a huge problem here. It's a huge problem with golf courses, which I find very environmentally damaging. And it's a huge problem in Miami on the river. I'm very involved with the Miami River Commission on the water quality there. I agree with everything that you say. It's just that in order to achieve that, it's not a one-by-one thing on these applications. This is a broader discussion, which is very timely. And the way for it to come to pass is not on this application, another one of these applications, and you're right on your points there, is to come up with a plan in which it applies to everybody, whether they're in front of us or not. It's not like their car got towed and now they pay the traffic tickets. This is a much broader discussion which we should engage in. They got a separate venue and figure out a way to pass legislation that supports this and find means of enforcement. Because you can have 5 houses who are applying fertilizer and 20 that don't, and those 5 houses will continue polluting, and those 20 will have done very little to reduce that amount because they're trigger points, and we've far exceeded those trigger points. So I would welcome that discussion, but not on these applications. Because every one of these applications, you're right.
I think they're connected. I mean, clearly there are issues that go beyond the scope of this board, and they're in the villages. And with other entities overseeing it. We only deal with the things that we see before us, and especially where there's a long history of the issue of compliance and how we make our assessments based on representations that are made to us is relevant. But we can discuss this. I think we need to discuss this further, and we should certainly incorporate the trustees into this discussion.
By the way, I do agree. I wasn't negating your point, and I do agree on this application, given the history, we should insist on some sort of monitoring and enforcement of these conditions. I wasn't negating your point. Right. I agree. Understood. Just saying, yeah.
I think we're on similar pages.
Thank you.
I have just one question
I do have. Go ahead, Phil.
Bruce, are you on site when this is happening? When the Phragmites are being cut and the restoration occurs?
I'm sorry, were you asking me?
Yes. Are you on site when all of this occurs, or you kind of start them off, leave, and then come back type of thing?
I mean, given on this project, if you approve it, I will be on site because that's one of the conditions. In general, in terms of past experience, I would always be on site if it's somebody who I don't know. If it's a company that I've worked with and I know them well, then I would probably just be there. Not probably, I am there in the beginning to talk it through. And after that, I'm not normally on site.
Okay, thank you.
I do have one question for Joan. Regarding the generator, is there any plans for some sound attenuation or some screening or anything like that in this application?
To be honest, not that I'm aware of, but I'm sure they'd consider screening or sound attenuation if that is something the board was interested in.
That's something that I think the board has been moving towards more and more and becoming more of a standard, just because the village, the proximity for neighbors and everything, it just seems to be a...
I'd have to explore it with them, but I'm certainly happy to explore it with them.
Okay. Can we go to the overhead photo again? I had a question in regards of proximity and location. The original slide that we started with that showed the location.
That would be Bruce's.
Bruce, can you please pull up that overhead?
I'm trying to get that now.
Thank you.
This one?
The first one you started with.
Yeah, this. Do you see it now? I don't. I'm sorry, I didn't have screen sharing. Hold on.
Yeah, I see you.
Can you see that now?
Yes. Now I can see it. And I'm just going to expand this.
So the area where we're talking about is over here in terms of the existing structure.
The generator is to the side of the shed, away from the pump.
And what is the type of generator? Is this gas or fuel? Is it diesel or is it?
I believe it's a diesel one.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm trying to paint
this one is only 14 feet from the property line.
Yeah.
And why was this put in originally non-conforming? Because since it's diesel, you could have. It's not that you had to be closer to, LP lines or anything like that. What was it? Why was the decision made to put it in this location, which is non-conforming?
I can't speak to that. I don't know if Joan has any additional information. Otherwise, we'd have to bring this back to the applicant.
I don't have the history of it.
Joan, how old is this generator?
Several years old. I'm happy to get back to the board on that.
Yeah, if you could do that for the next meeting, kind of just give us the history. If the client is willing to use some sound attenuation as well as screening to help mitigate any noise from that to the neighborhood. Does anyone else have anything else to add today?
No, I think screening and sound attenuation is very achievable. There's not a high bar, and would be a very generous, fair trade-off here. I don't see any reason why any of those would be an issue for the applicant to engage in.
Great.
It's simple and the technology is there. I would definitely request that, I'd say.
Yeah. So I would make a recommendation that we leave the hearing open for additional information and to be able to hear from the town trustees. Is that okay with everyone?
Sounds good.
Yes. We don't need a motion, correct, Pam?
That's correct.
Okay. In that case, then, if Mr. McGurk is still around, I would ask that.
I don't see him on there.
Over. Okay.
We've
And
lost our chair. We're rudderless.
That's it.
Jim, bring us home to port, Jim.
Okay. So I would
Jimmy, I
recommend
make a
that
motion to
we,
close?
excellent. Thank you, Phil. Can I have a second?
Second.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Have a good day.
Aye.
Have a good weekend all.
Forward to the next meeting.